The quiet panic. This is something that's been haunting me for months now, and honestly, I never thought I'd be sharing this story with anyone. But after what happened last week, I can't keep this to myself anymore. Every single night for the past 4 months, something has been scratching at my bedroom window. And I'm not talking about a tree branch or some random animal. This is deliberate, methodical, and it's getting worse. I live on the 3rd floor of an apartment building. There's no tree anywhere near my window, no fire escape, nothing that could explain what I've been hearing. Yet every night around 2:30 in the morning, the scratching starts. It begins soft, almost like fingernails gently dragging across glass, but it gradually gets more aggressive, more desperate. I know what you're thinking. You're probably rolling your eyes right now, assuming this is just another made-up ghost story or some elaborate prank. Trust me, I thought the same thing at first. I'm not the type of person who believes in paranormal nonsense or gets spooked easily. I'm a software engineer, for crying out loud. I live my life based on logic and facts. But what I've experienced over these past few months has completely shattered everything I thought I knew about reality. The first time it happened was back in March. I had just moved into this apartment after landing a new job downtown. The rent was decent, the neighborhood seemed safe, and the building was relatively quiet during the day. Perfect for someone like me who works long hours and values peace and quiet when I get home. I was exhausted from unpacking boxes all weekend, and I had finally gotten my bedroom set up the way I wanted it. I remember that first night so clearly because I had trouble falling asleep in the new place. You know how it is when you're in an unfamiliar environment. Every little sound seems amplified, and your brain refuses to shut down. I was lying there in the dark, probably around 2 in the morning, when I heard this faint scratching noise. At first, I thought it was coming from the apartment next door. Maybe someone moving furniture or doing some late-night cleaning. But as I listened more carefully, I realized the sound was coming from my window. I got out of bed and walked over to investigate. My bedroom window faces the back of the building, overlooking a small courtyard area with some benches and a few struggling trees. From my 3rd floor vantage point, I could see the entire courtyard bathed in the orange glow of the streetlights. Everything looked normal, empty, peaceful even. I pressed my face against the glass and looked down, expecting to see a cat or maybe a raccoon that had somehow made its way up the building. Nothing. The scratching had stopped the moment I approached the window. I stood there for maybe 5 minutes, waiting to hear it again, but everything remained silent. I chalked it up to the building settling or maybe some debris that had gotten caught in the wind. Old buildings make weird noises, right? I went back to bed and eventually fell asleep, thinking nothing more of it. But the next night, it happened again. Same time, same pattern. Soft scratching that gradually became more insistent before suddenly stopping. This time, I didn't get up to check. I figured if I ignored it, whatever was causing the noise would eventually go away on its own. I pulled my pillow over my head and tried to block it out. By the 4th night, I was starting to get annoyed. The scratching was becoming a regular occurrence, and it was seriously affecting my sleep. I work in a high-pressure environment where being sharp and focused is crucial, and I was starting to feel the effects of sleep deprivation during the day. My concentration was slipping, I was making careless mistakes in my code, and my boss had even commented on how tired I looked during our morning stand-up meetings. I decided to take action. I went to the hardware store and bought a small security camera, one of those wireless ones that connects to your smartphone. My plan was to set it up facing the window so I could finally figure out what was causing all this noise. If it was an animal, I could call animal control. If it was some kind of structural issue with the building, I could report it to the landlord. Setting up the camera was easy enough. I positioned it on my dresser, angled it toward the window, and synced it with the app on my phone. The video quality was decent, and the night vision feature would let me see clearly even in complete darkness. I felt pretty proud of myself for taking such a practical approach to solving the problem. By tomorrow morning, I'd have my answer, and hopefully I'd be able to get a full night's sleep again. That night, I went to bed feeling optimistic. I had my phone on the nightstand ready to check the live feed the moment I heard the scratching start. Sure enough, around 2:30, the familiar sound began. Soft at first, then growing more aggressive. I grabbed my phone and opened the camera app, expecting to finally see what had been tormenting me for the past week. What I saw on that screen made my blood run cold. There was definitely something at my window, but it wasn't an animal. It was a hand, a human hand pressed against the glass from the outside. The fingernails were long and jagged, scraping back and forth across the surface in that same methodical pattern I had been hearing night after night. But here's the thing that really messed with my head. Remember, I'm on the 3rd floor. There's no balcony, no fire escape, no ledge. Nothing that would allow a person to stand outside my window. Yet there it was, clear as day on my phone screen. A pale, thin hand with those horrible fingernails scratching away at my window like it was trying to claw its way inside. I could see the individual fingers moving, the way the nails caught the light from the street lamps below. It was undeniably real, undeniably human, and completely impossible. I sat there in my bed, staring at the screen, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. The scratching continued for maybe 10 more minutes before the hand suddenly disappeared. 1 second it was there, the next it was gone, leaving only the empty window frame in the camera's view. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat up until dawn, watching the live feed, waiting for the hand to return. But nothing happened. When the sun finally came up, I worked up the courage to go to the window and examine it from the inside. There were scratch marks in the glass, faint but definitely there. Fresh ones that hadn't been there before. I called in sick to work that day. I needed time to process what I had seen and figure out what to do next. I watched the camera footage over and over again, looking for any detail I might have missed, any logical explanation for what appeared to be impossible. But no matter how many times I replayed those 10 minutes of video, the conclusion remained the same. Someone or something had been scratching at my 3rd floor window from the outside. That was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, the scratching became more frequent and more intense. What started as a once-a-night occurrence soon became a nightly ritual that could last for hours. The hand would appear at different times, sometimes as early as midnight, sometimes not until 4 in the morning. But it always came back. I started documenting everything. I kept a detailed log of when the scratching occurred, how long it lasted, and any patterns I could identify. I saved every piece of camera footage, building up what I thought might be evidence if I ever needed to involve the police. Though what exactly I would tell them, I had no idea. The most disturbing part was how the behavior seemed to be escalating. At first, the scratching would stop the moment I turned on a light or made any noise. But as the weeks went by, that changed. The hand became bolder, more persistent. It would continue scratching even when I was clearly awake and moving around the room. Sometimes I would stand directly in front of the window staring out at this impossible sight, and those fingernails would keep scraping away at the glass like I wasn't even there. The scratch marks on my window were getting deeper too. What started as faint surface scratches were becoming visible grooves etched into the glass. I measured them one morning and found they were getting progressively longer and more pronounced each night. Whatever was doing this was either getting stronger or more determined, maybe both. I tried everything I could think of to make it stop. I hung heavy curtains over the window, thinking that if the thing couldn't see inside, maybe it would lose interest and move on. The scratching continued. I played loud music all night, hoping the noise would scare it away. Nothing changed. I even went so far as to tape cardboard over the entire window, completely blocking the view from outside. The scratching still happened right on schedule. That's when I realized this wasn't random. Whatever was out there knew exactly which window was mine, and it was specifically targeting me. The thought sent chills down my spine. This wasn't some confused animal or even a random prowler. This was personal. I started reaching out to my neighbors, trying to be casual about it. I'd run into people in the hallway or by the mailboxes and casually ask if they'd been hearing any strange noises at night. Nobody knew what I was talking about. The woman who lives directly below me, Mrs. Chen, told me she's a light sleeper and would definitely notice if there were weird sounds coming from above her apartment. The guy across the hall works night shifts and is usually awake until dawn. He'd never heard anything unusual either. I was completely isolated in this experience. Whatever was happening to me wasn't affecting anyone else in the building. That realization made everything so much worse because it meant I couldn't rely on anyone else to validate what I was going through. I started questioning my own sanity. Maybe the stress of the new job and the move had triggered some kind of breakdown. Maybe I was hallucinating everything. But then I remembered the camera footage, the scratch marks in the glass. These weren't products of my imagination. They were real, physical evidence that something was happening to me. Something that defied every logical explanation I could come up with. By the end of May, the nightly visits were taking a serious toll on my mental and physical health. I was barely sleeping. My work performance had declined to the point where my supervisor called me into his office for a formal discussion, and I was starting to develop what I can only describe as a phobia of my own bedroom. I would stay up as late as possible, sometimes falling asleep on the couch just to avoid being in that room when the scratching started. But no matter where I slept in the apartment, I could still hear it. That methodical scraping sound seemed to echo through the walls, following me wherever I tried to hide. It was like the thing outside knew exactly where I was at all times and wanted to make sure I couldn't escape its presence. I decided to try staying somewhere else for a few nights. Maybe if I wasn't in the apartment, the scratching would stop and whatever was doing this would eventually give up and move on. I packed a bag and went to stay with my brother across town. For the first time in months, I actually got a full night's sleep. No scratching, no mysterious hands, no scratch marks appearing on windows. Just blessed, normal silence. I stayed at my brother's place for almost a week, and every night was peaceful. I started to feel like maybe I had finally escaped whatever nightmare had been plaguing me. Maybe the thing had given up and found someone else to torment. I was actually starting to feel optimistic about returning to my apartment. That optimism was short-lived. When I finally went back to my place to grab some more clothes, I discovered that the scratching had continued every single night, even when I wasn't there. The scratch marks on my window had grown significantly deeper, and there were new ones I had never seen before. Long parallel grooves that ran from the top of the window frame all the way to the bottom. The glass looked like it had been attacked by some kind of wild animal with razor-sharp claws, but the most terrifying discovery was what I found on my phone. The security camera had been recording everything while I was away, and when I checked the footage, I saw that the hand had appeared every night right on schedule. It had been scratching at my window for hours each night, even though there was no one there to hear it. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't about scaring me or getting my attention. This thing was trying to get inside, and my presence or absence didn't matter to it at all. I couldn't stay at my brother's place indefinitely, so I had no choice but to return to my apartment. But now I knew that running away wasn't going to solve anything. Whatever was happening to me would continue whether I was there to witness it or not. I had to find another solution. That's when I made the decision that changed everything. Last Tuesday night, instead of hiding in my bed or trying to ignore the scratching, I decided to confront it directly. I waited until the familiar sound started, then I walked over to the window and pressed my face against the glass. The hand was there, just like always, scratching away with those horrible fingernails. But this time I didn't back away. I placed my own hand on the glass directly opposite the one on the outside. The scratching stopped immediately. For a moment, we were mirror images of each other, separated only by a thin sheet of glass. Then slowly, the other hand pressed flat against the window, matching the position of mine perfectly. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, though it was probably only a few minutes. That's when I saw the face. It emerged from the darkness beyond the glass like something rising from deep water. Pale, gaunt, with hollow eyes that seemed to look right through me. It wasn't quite human, but it wasn't entirely inhuman either. It was something caught between the two. Something that had once been a person but had become something else entirely. The face mouthed a single word over and over again, though I couldn't hear any sound through the glass. It took me several repetitions to understand what it was saying. Help. It was asking for help. I don't know how long I stood there, staring into those desperate, hollow eyes. But eventually the face faded back into the darkness and the hand disappeared with it. The scratching stopped, and for the first time in 4 months, my window was quiet. That was a week ago, and it hasn't come back since. I don't know what it wanted or why it chose me. I don't know if it was real or if I've been slowly losing my mind for the past 4 months. All I know is that whatever was scratching at my window every night was trying to communicate something, and maybe, just maybe, it finally got through. I'm sharing this story because I need to know if anyone else has experienced something similar. If you've ever had something inexplicable happen to you, something that challenged everything you thought you knew about reality, please let me know in the comments. Because right now I feel more alone than I've ever felt in my entire life, and I could really use some confirmation that I'm not completely losing my sanity. The scratch marks are still there on my window. They're permanent now, etched into the glass like scars that will never heal. Every time I look at them, I'm reminded of those 4 months of terror and confusion. But I'm also reminded of that final moment when I saw the desperation in those hollow eyes and realized that whatever was out there might have been just as frightened and confused as I was.